You're watching WorldScope, where we bring clear insight into the stories shaping our world. Today we take a closer look at the renewed wave of drone and missile strikes in Ukraine, and what this latest escalation reveals about the direction of the war and the strategies driving it. Over the weekend, Ukrainian authorities reported one of the heaviest aerial attacks in recent months. Waves of drones and missiles targeted cities across the country, including Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa. Officials said most of the drones were intercepted by air defenses, but several missiles broke through and struck energy infrastructure, leading to temporary blackouts and damage to transmission lines. Emergency services rushed to restore power as residents spent part of the night in shelters. This surge in attacks follows several weeks of quieter fronts and comes as both sides brace for another harsh winter. For Ukraine, defending its skies has become a race against time and resources. Each interception depletes expensive air defense ammunition, while Russia appears to be producing or sourcing new drones and missiles faster than expected. Analysts note that the timing is deliberate. Winter temperatures make infrastructure more vulnerable and force governments to divert attention from the battlefield to maintaining civilian services. Targeting the energy grid has become a defining tactic of the war. Last winter, similar barrages left millions of Ukrainians without power or heat, sometimes for days. By striking critical facilities early in the season, Russia signals its intent to test Ukraine's endurance, and by extension, the resolve of its Western allies who continue to supply weapons and financial aid. Military analysts outline several motives behind the latest escalation. First, Moscow aims to drain Ukraine's air defense missile reserves. Each interceptor costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, while many of Russia's drones are built cheaply and in large numbers. Second, repeated strikes create logistical pressure, forcing Ukraine to reposition defenses around cities rather than along the front lines. Third, these attacks carry a political message. Even as the front remains largely static, Russia can still reach deep into Ukrainian territory whenever it chooses. At the same time, Ukraine has expanded its own long-range capabilities. Reports indicate that Ukrainian forces have struck oil depots and rail hubs inside Russian territory using domestically produced drones. These operations demonstrate Ukraine's growing technical innovation and serve as a warning that energy vulnerability runs both ways. The conflict has increasingly become a contest of attrition, not just on the ground but in the skies, where unmanned systems play a central role. The international response was swift. The United States and European governments condemned the renewed bombardment and reiterated their commitment to supporting Ukraine's defense. Washington announced a fresh aid package focused on air defense equipment, spare parts, and repair tools for the electricity grid. European Union officials said additional humanitarian funding would be released to help civilians cope with potential outages during the coldest months. Meanwhile, Russia maintains that its operations target military infrastructure and blames Western nations for prolonging the conflict through continued arms deliveries. Energy experts warn that repeated attacks on power plants and substations could create cascading failures across the grid. Ukraine's engineers have learned to isolate damaged sections quickly, preventing total collapse, but replacement parts are increasingly scarce. Generators donated by allies now form a crucial backup system. Yet the cost of constant repairs weighs heavily on local budgets. International organizations, including the United Nations and the World Health Organization, have urged both sides to protect civilian infrastructure, emphasizing that access to heat, light, and clean water are basic human rights. For civilians, this renewed offensive revives painful memories of last winter. Families keep emergency kits by their doors and stock up on batteries, candles, and fuel whenever air raid sirens sound. Schools continue hybrid schedules, alternating between in-person and online learning depending on power stability. Despite the danger, life goes on. Shops open, transport runs, and cultural events persist as symbols of resilience. Psychologists in Kyiv describe a population that has grown used to uncertainty, yet determined not to surrender normalcy. In Russia, the strikes are framed as necessary retaliation for Ukrainian incursions and Western sanctions. State media emphasize technological advances in domestic weapons production and portray the campaign as proof that pressure from abroad has failed to weaken Moscow's defense industry. Independent analysts, however, note that the conflict's prolonged nature is taking a toll on both economies, diverting resources from social programs and infrastructure. Globally, the war's effects continue to ripple through energy and food markets. European gas prices remain sensitive to disruptions in Ukrainian transit routes, while grain exports through the Black Sea fluctuate amid security concerns. Developing nations dependent on imported grains still face higher food costs as insurers and shippers factor in wartime risk. Diplomatic efforts to stabilize exports have yielded only temporary results, underscoring how the conflict's consequences extend far beyond Eastern Europe. Strategically, this new phase suggests that both sides are settling into long-term endurance rather than breakthrough offensives. Russia's focus on infrastructure aims to wear down morale and resources. Ukraine's counterstrikes seek to show capability and maintain international attention. Each move carries symbolic weight, proving to allies and adversaries alike that they remain strong enough to fight through the winter. Experts caution that such a pattern can entrench the conflict, making diplomatic compromise harder. When civilian hardship becomes routine, fatigue grows abroad and at home. Western policymakers worry about maintaining public support for aid if progress on the battlefield stalls, while Russia hopes that economic pressure and political divisions in donor nations will eventually reduce assistance to Kyiv. As snow begins to fall, the war again shifts from open fields to power plants, warehouses, and supply lines. The question is not only who controls territory, but who can keep lights on and citizens warm through another season of strain. Each drone and missile now tests more than just defenses. It tests endurance, logistics, and the will to continue. As winter deepens, both sides appear focused on survival rather than advance. The months ahead will measure not only military strength, but also the stability of economies, alliances, and morale. Whatever the outcome, the humanitarian cost continues to mount, reminding the world that behind every statistic are millions of ordinary lives adapting to extraordinary circumstances. You're watching WorldScope, where we bring you clarity and context in a complex world. Subscribe to stay informed as this and other global stories continue to unfold.